Occultations. Let me turn down this beautiful music by Eric Deutsch. Greetings, friends. Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. Gemini Brett here. It is today, May 12th, 2023, Venus's Day. Here in May, a month named for Maya, this beautiful star of the Pleiades, the mother of Hermes. I hope you're doing well. I was inspired to find this morning that next week on May 17th, 2023, if you're into that whole Gregorian trip anyway, that shortly after Jupiter ingresses Taurus, Moon will occult Jupiter. And as it is with occultations, including occultations of the sun, those things that we of course call solar eclipses, these cannot be seen from everywhere on Earth. For one thing, if it's an occultation by the moon, which are the principal occultations we see, right? Why? Because moon gets around the zodiac most quickly, but also moon is large, and when the sun occults a star, you're not going to see it, right? Because we're blinded by the sun's light. The star would be under the beams of the sun. Does that make sense? I know it does. So it is lunar occultations that we most often are able to experience visibly. Now, you can have a planet occulting a star, for sure. I've watched those. Planets occulting planets, Venus occulting Mars, for example, which are amazing things to see. This is like a super conjunction, if you will. People often ask, well, what does an occultation mean? And I answer that question as I tend to with a question, right? Like, what's the difference for you between the energy of a typical new moon and a solar eclipse? Or a typical full moon and a lunar eclipse, right? I mean, I think most of us would suggest there's a pretty significant difference between a new moon and a solar eclipse. Like, solar eclipses are stronger, right? More powerful, probably will have more energetic contributions to our earthly experience, and might have a longer lasting signature within our lives, within and without. And I would suggest the same is true for occultations of the planets by the moon, or stars by the moon, or stars by planets. And if you've seen one, it's pretty amazing. I mean, it kind of helps you, I don't know, experience the depth of the heavens. Like, I remember witnessing in, what was it, 2014, maybe 2015, a solar eclipse from my backyard in Seattle at the time. And just watching the moon occult the sun, it was a partial solar eclipse, but just seeing that, they appeared to be the same size, but clearly the moon was closer to me than the sun, right? Coming between me and the sun. And now we know all these things, or at least we think we do, right? Or at least we were taught that stuff in school if we listened or have learned ourselves, which is the best way of learning, of course. But it's another thing to witness it, to see it, to experience it, to sensualize it, to bring it down into the body, right? To really feel the actual matter on your shirt, not just contemplate it. Anyway, so I was able to see an occultation of Mars by the moon on December 7th, 2022, right here in the Bay Area of California. And it was an amazing thing to experience. Moon ate Mars, and then Mars kind of got spit out from the other side. And you can find on this channel all sorts of videos about that, actually. I remember I recorded a time-lapse video, and I don't know that I ever really edited it down and showed it. It was kind of I want that to be mine. But one of the things I was really tripping on at the time, and have been since, and in some regards before, but like it's really kind of taken one of the center stages in my cosmic contemplation is the idea of parallax. Because this is really important in regards to why, for example, during a solar eclipse, right, moon occulting the solar disk, the sun from Earth's point of view, why that can't be seen everywhere on Earth. Now, for half of Earth, the answer is it's nighttime and the sun is not in the sky. So, of course, you're not going to see anything fly between you and the sun if the sun is beneath the ground. I think on that we can all agree. Well, look, you might be able to see through the ground with your spidey senses, and I'm down with that, okay? But I'm talking about visibly naked eye style, right? I mean, you can see a solar eclipse also online. If it's nighttime, I do it all the time, beam into these videos that are shown from the other side of the world, and I have a lot of gratitude for that. But generally speaking, I think we can all agree that you're not going to see anything fly between you and the sun when it's nighttime because the sun is beneath the ground, yeah? Okay. So half of the Earth, which is always in its own shadow, the half of Earth that is opposite the sun, will not experience a solar eclipse because it's nighttime, right? But why, for the rest of the places on Earth where it's daytime and the sun is in the sky and clouds allow and the weather's cool and mountains on the horizon too, and you can see the sun, why, when the moon comes between Earth and sun for solar eclipse, is that not visible everywhere on Earth where the sun is in the sky, everywhere on the daytime side of Earth? And the answer, my friends, is parallax. So let's say that you are the Earth. Hi, Earth. And I am the sun. My face is the sun. And this beautiful cup, thank you, Becca, is the moon, okay? Well, let's say the moon is occulting the sun. But depending on where you're standing on Earth, you might experience this more like that. And so while some people on Earth are seeing the moon totally eclipse the sun or totally occult the sun, some people are experiencing a partial solar eclipse, and this part of the sun can still be seen because they're simply standing on a different place of Earth. Some people will see this much of the sun shown. Some people will just experience this like a typical new moon, which is a no moon, which is we experience no shadow play at all because the moon is above the sun or below the sun from our point of view, right? And that's actually happening during solar eclipses as well. Like you have to be in a certain place on Earth, right? So let's say now you are the sun and I am the Earth. And if I'm up here, right, I'm a person on Earth. If I'm standing up here, I can actually see you. Where I'm down here, I can't. Do you see what I mean? If I'm here, I can see you. And that's the general idea of parallax. Like you experience it all the time. Oh, what's a good example? I'm looking right now at the beautiful peak of Mount Tamalpais. And when I go this way and that, the mountain kind of seems to move, but the only reason why that's going down is I'm experiencing the parallax of, in this case, my line of my window, the window frame kind of shifting, or I can put this here and that cup's going to one side or the other of the mountain peak as I move my head. Do you see what I mean? So I can be standing at this place on Earth and it's cup occulting Mount Tamalpais. But if I'm looking from over here, it's not occultation at all. Play those games, okay, with parallax. It's a pretty fun thing to do. And again, just this example is kind of all you need, right? Like, now you see me, now you don't. I can't move you because the camera's fixed that you're looking through, okay? Can't move the zit either, friends. Tried. Anyway, so this occultation of Jupiter. Now, maybe we'll look at this first astronomically and then contemplate this energetically through our correspondences. Astrology, of course, being the rainbow bridge between those two, the measurable heavenly happenings, the astronomy, and the immeasurable, the correspondences, the quantity, and the quality. Speaking of tea, this is definitely going to require an aged puer, don't you think? I do. All right, filling up that moon cup. Let's head over to a wonderful place online. This is inthesky.org. It's, I find, to actually be the best online resources for occultations. And it's one of the first things that came up when I just did a little search on the internet for 2023 lunar occultation of Jupiter. So here we see Wednesday, May 13th, 2023 at 5:40 Pacific. And they give us the universal time as well. I'm interested in seeing that they wrote this in Pacific time. And then we're reading the moon will pass in front of Jupiter. We can see that there's somewhere around, well, they're not really showing it on this frame anyway. I'll show it to you where it is in the sky, and we can trip on the constellations in just a little bit. The occultation will be visible from San Mateo. I don't know if they're talking about San Mateo. Oh, I guess because of this. Maybe they assume I'm coming in from San Mateo. I'm a little bit further north of that place. Let's just type like Denver. I don't know. I don't know if that's how you work this site anyway. Who cares? So the eclipse will be, or the occultation of Jupiter will be visible from San Mateo. You see this? The moon will pass in front of Jupiter, creating a lunar occultation visible from countries and territories, including Canada, the contiguous United States, Greenland, and Mexico, amongst others. Yeah, okay. And if the sun is in the sky, you're not going to see moon occult anything with your naked eye unless it's the sun itself. Oh, or a tree or a mountain peak or something like that. Wait, no, the mountain peaks and the trees occult the moon. They're closer to you, right? Why? Because we can't see Jupiter during the day. Now you can if you have a telescope or binoculars. I have seen Venus during the day with my naked eye when she's at her brightest, which is kind of happening now. It's an amazing thing to experience. So I was told that's impossible, and the sky told me that it is quite possible. I saw one night, I went to see moon occult, or like conjoin Venus, right? And let's just rap about that. So a moon Venus conjunction, an amazing thing. I mean, one of the most beautiful things. Venus is either morning star, seen before sunrise, or evening star, as she is now, seen after sunset. And so because Venus and moon or sun are always close by, the furthest Venus can get from the sun from our point of view is like 48 degrees. It's always a crescent moon that's with Venus, you know? And crescent moon can occult Venus, which I have not personally yet seen. I would suggest that gets a little bit stronger, but I have seen many moon-Venus conjunctions, and it's a great teaching of how not all conjunctions are like astronomically equal. Now there's lots of reasons actually that would support that statement, but one of them is like sometimes you'll see a moon Venus conjunction and in the chart it's like they're exact, and you look to the sky and they're like this far apart, and it's like, wait, what? It's like, is the chart wrong? And no, the reason for this is that planets have latitude as well as longitude. Longitude is where they are along the ecliptic, the path of the sun. But because planets have their own path, they're typically found either north or south of that ecliptic plane, the heart of the zodiac, the path of the sun. And that distance north or south of the ecliptic, that's called celestial latitude. An example I often use is that though Seattle, Washington, where I once lived, and Richmond, California, where I now do, are literally on the same longitude of Earth, like north and south of one another, they have significantly different latitudes. So they might be conjunct in longitude, right? But it's certainly not like I can go walk down the street and hang out with my friends in Seattle. Like I have to get in a car or a plane or on a very long bike ride or hike or something like that, right? And so it is in the sky. Like you can have planets that are conjunct, but have different, we could say, celestial latitude. That's their measurement north or south of the ecliptic, the path of the sun, or also different declinations. That's their distance north or south of the celestial equator, right? And if they have the same longitude, same zodiac degree, but differ in latitude or differ in declination, then no occultation for you. One is here and the other's there. Sometimes they're really close, sometimes they're like pretty far, and it's like, wait, what? That's the conjunction I paid for. Sometimes you get an amazing show like an occultation. Now, a very key thing about witnessing the sky or the stars is it better be night. You know, we often say in astrology that the 12th house is associated with hidden things. Well, interestingly, the sun rises into the 12th house to become visible in the morning, right? Like the first house, and I'm talking quadrant houses, astrologers like Placidus, Porphyry, Campanus, Koch, Regiomontanus, whatever you want. Like first house is beneath the ground. So when the sun is in the first house, and the birds are singing, baboons might be screaming and waiting for those rays, and you see some dawn light and whatnot, but you're not going to see the sun. You're going to see that my shirt is covered in dog hair. Why? Because it's daytime. Because the sun has risen from that first into the 12th to become visible. But when sun becomes visible to illuminate the earth, he hides the sky. At night, we can tell time by watching all of the stars dancing through the heavens. By day, there can be only one star in your sky. We call it the sun. Do you feel this essence of the sun's associations with Aries and with Leo? Good enough. Okay, so the 12th house is hidden things. Why? Because the sun rises to illuminate the earth but hides the sky. The only times we can really see, or the only beings we can see in our sky, celestial beings during the day, are the sun and the moon. And as I was saying before, like I have seen Venus. I went to Joshua Tree to watch one of these moon Venus conjunctions, and I woke up in the morning and got out of my tent and saw moon, and it was like, okay, tonight's the night. And then it was like, wait, what is that dot next to the moon? And it's like, is that a plane? It's like, wait, that's Venus. And the friend I was with, do you see? Yeah. Oh my gosh, everyone I saw that day was like stopping on the trail. Hey, sorry to bother you, but do you see that dot there to the right of the moon? Yeah. Whoa, you can see Venus during the day. And that's like maybe the first of 5 different times I've now worshipped Venus in the daylight. Venus is the brightest celestial object next to moon and sun. As I'm recording this in May of 2023, all you have to do is go outside after sunset and you can really see that truth. It's an amazing thing. You know, you can very clearly see at this time when Venus is so bright as an evening star, why Venus is the most commonly reported UFO. Seriously. Okay, so the occultation of Jupiter. Because from the surface of Earth, Moon's parallax is significant. Not all views from Earth will witness this Moon-Jupiter occultation. Amazingly, we measure astrology not from the surface of Earth where we live and breathe and can witness these heavenly happenings, but rather from the center of Earth. And that's a very strange thing. When I first found out about that, and I found out because I couldn't quite understand why the time that the astronomers said a lunar eclipse that I had taken people to watch in Arizona was different than what the astrology chart suggested. Turns out the astronomers were right. I was like, why is there, like, at that time, I think it was like a 38-minute difference? And the answer was because my chart was geocentric, measured from the center of Earth, where, of course, we were watching topocentric, watching from the surface of Earth. And there's a slight difference. The moon is actually close enough to the Earth that the distance from the center of Earth to the moon is different enough from the distance between the surface of Earth and the moon. And, the surface of California versus the surface of Hawaii, right? Like, those are different distances to the moon in any given moment of time. Trippy truth, right? The distance from New York to the moon versus Peru to the moon. I mean, Peru is like generally south of New York, maybe a little bit southwest, but I mean, they're pretty close to the same, like, longitude, significantly different latitudes, New York being northern hemisphere, Peru being southern hemisphere, right? And, like, literally, let's say the moon is up in a northern sign like Taurus. New York, like, if the moon's culminating, it will be closer to New York than it will be to Peru. And that distance from the surface of Earth to the moon, from these two different surface locations on Earth to the moon, cause a parallax. Like, this is not to scale or whatever, let's say New York sees the moon here. But it's easier if I move my head. To move your head, I have to move this instead. So, New York might see the moon at this star and Peru might see the moon over here. But we are measuring almost 99.9% of the time as astrologers, and many astrologers don't even know this. We're measuring from the center of Earth. And I think the beautiful thing there is that we are actually measuring our experience of Earth's experience of the heavenly happenings, okay? So if there's a solar eclipse going down, just because you don't see it doesn't mean you don't be it. Like, it's happening to the Earth and you are of the Earth. Now, interestingly, and I found this to be true for that Moon-Mars occultation that I experienced on December 7th, 2022 with a cool crew of astro folks here in the Bay. That particular moon occultation of Mars was visible in many places on Earth, but it was not an occultation geocentrically. So on some levels, you could say, does it really matter? I mean, like, I don't think at the center of the Earth you could see the sky. Like, who knows what kind of equipment they got down there, y'all, or up there, or whatever. But there is something about kind of like the heart of the Earth, the heart of the moon, and the heart of Mars, or the heart of Jupiter all aligning. We can imagine if there's kind of a gravitational contribution, which there must be some, or tidal contribution, which is actually measurable, certainly with the moon, but also with Jupiter, or electromagnetic, the alignment of the three things must be most significant, might be more significant. All right, so let's play with some astronomy softwares and other things, and I can show you why I discovered this morning that this eclipse is indeed visible from here in the Bay, and I'm making some plans with some friends in the school to go check it out. And why, though, here, like in the sky.org, we can see that the occultation is available also in most of Scandinavia, and looks like Scotland, and maybe some of even Ireland, certainly Greenland and Iceland, and almost all of Canada and whatnot, that you get this bit over here kind of left off. But there's just these dashed lines. So let's just read this. Outside of the contours, meaning the shaded region, the moon does not pass in front of Jupiter at any time Or is it below the horizon at the time of the occultation? Or no, sorry, or is below the horizon, right? So it might be like the alignment of the things are all happening, but again, they're below the horizon, so you can't see them anyway. However, a close conjunction between the pair may be visible. And then it's just giving us times, okay? All right, well, what I showed at the beginning was over here in Stellarium software, which has been playing ever since, I'm just noticing. So let me go back to May 17th, and I'm going to go to 4 a.m., which is when I'm planning on meeting with folks. This is cast for where I currently sit in El Sobrante, California. Probably be, Berkeley is going to be closer to where I'm watching it. That's really not so far from here. That's not going to change much at all, but I'm going to go to Berkeley anyway. I'm also going to find Berkeley with another E and then teach Stellarium that it's in California. Okay. So let's look to the east. Now at this time, Moon is still beneath the ground. Of course, the sun is. It's daytime, right? Here is Saturn, the ringed one. Let me supersize him. You can see him there. And now you can see Jupiter. Let me supersize the moon. Okay, so it's Moon, Jupiter. Conjunction is going down. Well, let's get them to rise. Why don't I just click on Jupiter so you can see Jupiter highlighted here. And this is now 4:04 a.m. And I'm just going to move through this through time. So May 17th, 2023, Berkeley, California. Now 4:15 a.m., right? All before sunrise. And this is happening beneath the ground, but this wonderful Stellarium astronomy software is letting me take a look. Okay, and here's the occultation. So I think in the sky.org has California in that kind of dashed line bit because the occultation starts while they're underground. Okay, so here you can just start seeing Jupiter kind of coming back out from the moon according to Stellarium software. Let me just stop time here. This is 5:15 a.m. May 17th, 2023. Now you can see that this is going down around the kind of boundaries of the Fishes constellation, which by the way look like Aries for a reason. And they in our day and age host the 0 degrees tropical Aries point, the east equinox point, which is where the ecliptic, the plane of the year, crosses the equator, the plane of the day, from the south to the north. If you've been studying with me, you've heard me say that 1,000 times. For those of you who have not and you'd like to know more, please do. All right, so we get the ram here. But because the moon is south of the ecliptic, the path of the sun, has southern latitude, like all planets have their own orbital path, there is Jupiter's. Jupiter's path actually stays quite close to the ecliptic. You can see where that orange line is crossing the yellow line, Jupiter's path crossing the path of the sun. Well, that's one of Jupiter's nodes. That's Jupiter's south node, which resides in tropical Capricorn. At this time, the moon's nodes, let's click on the moon here, are actually in tropical Taurus, north node in Scorpio. This is the moon's north node in Taurus here, where the moon's path is crossing from the south to the north of the sun's path. So Jupiter is always relatively close to the sun. Like at this time, we see Jupiter has to the path of the sun, not to the sun itself. The sun conjoins Jupiter every 399 days on average, and otherwise is somewhat separated, right? Sun conjoined Jupiter, I think it was April 10th or 11th, 2023, in late tropical Aries, and now sun's moved along, getting close to Gemini. The Pleiades in our day and age, which I'm circling here, mark the Gemini, the cusp of tropical Taurus and Gemini. That's this line right here, okay? So here's 0 Aries, 15 Aries. This is the cusp of tropical Taurus. fact, it's just the day before this lunar occultation of Jupiter that Jupiter moves. Let me go back in time. I'll leave these lines on here so you can see that this line right here, okay, this is 0 tropical Taurus. It's a celestial longitude, 30 degrees from 0 Aries. It's like 2.5, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, which is 0 degrees of the next sign, okay? We just go back a day. And now we see Jupiter has a celestial longitude of 2957. Okay, that's 29 degrees 57 tropical Aries, because celestial longitude is measured from this crossing point of the planes of the year, the ecliptic, and the planes of the day, the equator. All right, so as soon as Jupiter here the next day gets to 30 degrees celestial longitude, that's now Jupiter's in Taurus, tropical Taurus, okay? And so this occultation is just happening kind of the day after. We'll look at that in the chart in a little bit and kind of look at some of the other alignments, like the very strong square of this Jupiter occultation to Pluto in the first degree of tropical Aquarius. What does that suggest, right? You hear these words like Pluto and occultation, and it's like, oh no. No, maybe we don't need to trip that much. I will say that in like the celestial longitudes, we can go down here and we see the knot, Alrisha, the knot that ties Venus and Cupid, the two fishes together. Perhaps you know that tale. I can go further down and see kind of heart of the sea monster space. I can go further up and we'll see actually, for example, here, Meroc of Andromeda, who has a celestial longitude of 3043, another 43 minutes tropical Taurus, okay? Very close to this moon Jupiter occultation. We see them with the sea monster Cetus. Hopefully this does not mean that the sea monster, the Seattle Kraken, will be occulted or excluded from the NHL hockey playoffs, but maybe some of you don't care about that. And I wonder what this might mean for the Kraken. I will say mythically, it's a pretty interesting place in space. The myth of Andromeda, who is the daughter of Cassiopeia and Cephas here, the queen and the king, who were punished for their hubris, and they were told by Poseidon and Hades that the Kraken would be sent to unleash a fury on their city if they did not reinstate the temples of the gods and goddesses that they had destroyed and re-erect their statues and sacrifice a virgin to the sea monster according to the rites of old. And they were like, no way. But their daughter Andromeda, who it said was a reverent one, walked herself to the cliff's edge and chained herself to the ancient sacrificial temple, I guess I'll say, waiting for the sea monster to come and take her so she could save her people. But that never went down because Perseus flew by on Pegasus, the winged horse, holding the head of Medusa, the Gorgon, whom he had decapitated according to the directions of Athena, and with her assistant and the assistance of Hermes, and did it for his mommy. So a lot of people will say, oh, this is so patriarchal, this like warrior dude to cut off the head of the feminine. Well, he did it for his mom, y'all. Learn your myths. Anyway, the first thing that he used this powerful head for, riding the back of this Pegasus, who was actually born from the blood of the severed head of the Gorgon, was he used that eye of Medusa. He pulled it from the purse that Hermes gave him and showed it to this sea monster, which was on its way to consume this woman chained by the pillars, and he turned that monster into stone. So that's said to be how it is now. Now, if I went back 2,000 years, I'm just going to turn this to 23. All right. We're going to see that sea monster is here in tropical Aries. Okay. So back then, the East Equinox point 0 Aries was here. Oh, right at the fish that looked like the Aries glyph. That myth that says they were tied together as Venus and Cupid turned themselves into fish to escape the fire monster Typhon. That myth comes from this era when the fishes constellation were rising right at this crossing of the equator, the ecliptic, the planes of day and year respectively, and looking just like the Aries glyph, which by the way looks like how the eastern sky rises. I'll leave that there for now. If you'd like to know more, please take some of my classes with me. All right. Anyway, so it was in a different zone back then. Like if we had a moon occultation of Jupiter at the sea monster, then it would have been in the tropical sign of Aries. All right. So it's still happening in the same place of the constellations. Or, for example, if you prefer a star-based zodiac, a sidereal zodiac, it's going to happen in the same place. It's going to happen in the same nakshatra or lunar mansion. But it's happening in a very different place in respect to the directional zodiac, which is the tropical zodiac. Like so many ancient wisdom systems, the tropical zodiac is a directional device. And so we get Taurus, but sea monster, ram. And the story of the ram is an interesting one also of sacrifice. I was just speaking about this because the solar eclipse featured the sun in this zone here. I mean, even more so kind of at the head of the sea monster and the ram. This occultation of Jupiter, it's a little bit more like fishes, Andromeda, and this bright star of Merock. It might be fun to go learn something about that star. Actually, I'm currently teaching a fixed stars course, grounding the fixed stars into your astrology. Not too late for you to join us if you'd like. GeminiBrett.com/stars to find out more about that. Where we're kind of looking into some of these stars. So I might be interested in pursuing for this particular moon Jupiter occultation, whether it's an occultation where you're looking or not. I might look at Alrisha here, the knot of the fishes. Merock here, who has in our day and age a celestial longitude of 43, in other words, 43 arc minutes of tropical Taurus. And here's the moon during the occultation, 23 arc minutes, right? So within a third of a degree of Merock. You can also see the Andromeda galaxy here. I don't know if I can click on it. There we go. The Andromeda galaxy having a celestial longitude of 2809. That means 28 tropical Aries. Okay, so pretty close by. It might be a cool thing to look for, by the way, for the folks who choose to gather together here in the Bay, because we should go up kind of well before this time where there's be no Andromeda galaxy because the sun is in the first, about to rise, and the birds chirp. We will still see the moon, clouds allowing, and hopefully Jupiter too, to see Jupiter emerging from the moon post-occultation. We won't, let me just rewind time. We won't see the beginning of the occultation because that's happening beneath the ground from our point of view, right? So this is kind of what I expect to see, clouds allowing. And so where I want to take you next is looking for a place to go view this. And a lot of that happens to just come with a little help from my friends because I put a post up in our fixed star study group. Hey, you folks in the Bay want to go see this, and got one recommendation and another place that I've been invited to go see the stars from for some time kind of feels to make sense. Okay, so this is the view. And then the question is, well, where, like from Earth, and in which direction will we look, and those kinds of things. And this amazing open source astronomy software, Stellarium, is my kind of go-to place to help me figure some of this stuff out. And then I'll show you how I also work with Google Earth to do so. All right, so by this time, look, the sun is getting really close to the horizon. Stellarium actually suggests that we'll still see Jupiter This is probably pretty close to like non-magnified view, maybe more like that. And with stellarium shows Jupiter, if they show kind of like the name of Jupiter, they're kind of implying that Jupiter will be visible. I found that to be, from stellarium astronomy software, rather accurate actually. Although there's different settings that I can change. Like you'll just see Jupiter's name just went away there, okay? But it still shows moon. So they're suggesting that Jupiter can no longer be seen with the naked eye because the sun, right? Now Jupiter's there and so is Mercury. Now, one thing I'll just say I'm also intrigued by is that at this time, Mercury is on the same track as the moon and Jupiter. So let me just show you Mercury and show you Mercury's orbital path, okay? At this time, this is this occultation of Jupiter by the moon, or just after the occultation on May 17th, 2023. If you're into that whole Gregorian trip, this is now 6:08 a.m. Pacific time. You'll see that Mercury has a latitude of -3 degrees. He's a full 3 degrees south of the ecliptic plane, okay? So longitude for Mercury at the time, 36. That means 30 plus 6. That means all of Aries plus 6. That means 6 degrees tropical Taurus, okay? And that's longitude, again, a measurement along the ecliptic plane. But then latitude is the measurement north or south of the ecliptic. This latitude would be 5 degrees south. This would be 5 degrees north. The Pleiades are about 5 degrees north. Aldebaran is about 5 degrees south. And here we see Mercury, and thanks to stellarium, just shown at 3 degrees south latitude. Okay. Right. So why do I say Mercury's on the same track as Jupiter and the moon? Jupiter and the moon at this time, at the time of the occultation anyway, let me just rewind time a little bit. They're at the 1st degree of tropical Taurus, and the Mercury's at 6 degrees tropical Taurus. And you can see that here. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? Degrees, right? But because Mercury is farther south of the ecliptic, that's his latitude. Or I could say it this way as well. We can measure, instead of measuring from the ecliptic, we could measure from the celestial equator. Okay, so the equator, along the equator, measured from 0 tropical Aries, is what's called right ascension. So you'll see Mercury's right ascension here, 2 hours. We either measure that in a 360-degree circle or at a 24-hour circle, because of course the Earth spins in 24 hours with respect to the sun. All right. The partner coordinate of the equator grid is declination. So a declination's measurement north or south of the equator. And you can see Mercury here has a declination of 1041 north, okay? That's this distance. We bring in that grid to just kind of make that more visible. 5 degrees, 10 degrees north, Mercury a little bit further. Well, dig how on that same parallel, which is up here through a Pegasus wing, at least according to stellarium art, you also find moon and Jupiter, okay? So Mercury is what's called parallel moon and Jupiter during their occultation. They're on the same track. Mercury will rise in the same place of the horizon. He's going to follow Jupiter through the sky. This is a so-called conjunction and declination. Stellarium's archaeoastronomy tool lets me, so this is Mercury's orbital path, okay? But this is the path that Mercury will take through the sky on that day. Notice that Mercury's path is very close to Jupiter's path, which I'm now highlighting, and the moon's. If moon's path was not the same as Jupiter's, there would be no occultation at all. Like typically a moon-Jupiter conjunction will have the moon up here, the moon down there or something, okay? But in this case, because of all sorts of astronomical awesome sauce, the moon's path and Jupiter's path and Mercury's path are all the same. So it's moon conjunct Jupiter by celestial longitude, which you probably know as zodiac degree, the first degree of tropical Taurus, but also by declination, distance from the celestial equator. We're at like 1040 north, I think we saw, 10.5 degrees north of the equator, or by latitude, which is their distance from the ecliptic, and they have a distance of about 1 degree south of the ecliptic, okay? And that just has to do with where Jupiter's node is, where the moon's node is, like all sorts of amazement. And for Mercury too, like Mercury's distance from his node over here at this particular time arranges Mercury to rise in the same place later, culminate at the same altitude that Jupiter will set in the same place on the northwestern horizon, like Mercury's following in the path of Jupiter, and shortly after this occultation. So what might that mean for Mercury? All right, let's trip on that a little bit. I want to zoom out and show you some stars that are on the same path, because that's going to be necessary for me to, working with stars rising in the middle of the night are going to help me scout a space. Let me say it that way. All right, so we've talked about longitude and latitude. That's ecliptic coordinates, these. All right. Angular distance from 0 tropical Aries along the ecliptic, longitude, north or south of the ecliptic, latitude. We've talked about equatorial coordinates, right ascension measurement along the equator, declination measurement north or south of the equator. Those are called parallels, all right, just like the parallels on Earth. But these are parallels in the sky. We haven't yet talked about horizontal coordinates, the coordinates of your local horizon. Where's the button? There, okay. And so one of these is simply altitude, which I imagine you are familiar with, right? It's an angular distance above or below the horizon. Below the horizon, negative altitude. Above the horizon, which has an altitude of 0, positive altitude, up to the zenith, directly above our heads, which has an altitude of 90. Typically, we have to look up to see that, right? The stellarium kind of lets us play. So these are all lines of altitude. These are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 to the zenith, 90 degrees of altitude. We could go down beneath, okay? Well, the partner coordinate for the horizontal system is called azimuth. While altitude is up and down, azimuth is around and around. All right, so compass headings are azimuths. And the convention, by the way, is that due north has an azimuth of 0. And then we increase towards the east. East, of course, being square to north. And all astrologers know that square is 90 degrees, right? So east has an azimuth of 90. So I'm going to rewind this to where Moon and Jupiter are rising. And I got to turn my head this way. Okay, so it's like here. And I can see that Moon has an azimuth of 77 degrees, 76.51, but 51 out of 60 minutes in a degree, we're going to call that 77, all right? Especially given the truth that here in the Northern Hemisphere, everything's going to move towards the south to culminate. So the azimuth is going to increase after they rise. And, you know, we're probably going to see them more a degree or two of altitude above the ground. There's hills on the horizon, things like this, right? So maybe it'll be more like this time. Let me just cast 5 a.m. And now the moon has an altitude of 146, so almost 2 degrees above the horizon. And Jupiter will have the same altitude. It's an occultation, right? Let's go a little bit further ahead in time. Here's where we see Jupiter now kind of coming out from behind the moon. And they have an altitude at that time of 4 degrees above the horizon. And the azimuth is now 79 or 80 degrees. Okay, so I'm talking about looking at like 77 to 80 degrees in compass heading. So now I'm going to go over to Google Earth, and we're going to look at how that is from a couple of places that were suggested. All right, I just want to continue and look at Mercury rising. So, and by the way, there's what's called refraction. Look at Mercury's below the horizon when I have the atmosphere taken away. But with the atmosphere in, Mercury actually appears to be above the horizon, which is a strange thing. Now, Mercury is quite close to the sun, might be visible. If in a different sign, one of the so-called straight signs, Mercury would definitely be visible, but in a so-called crooked sign, because it rises crooked. And with significant southern latitude, this is not favorable for Mercury's visibility as a morning star from the northern hemisphere sky. Southern hemisphere right now, much more so. Anyway, maybe we'll get to catch a trickster too. And the cool thing is, if we just keep our eyes on where Moon and Jupiter did this thing, then Mercury might show himself next. Trickster, because he's on the same parallel, right? So that's not about, oh, you can see here at this time they have different altitudes, they have different azimuths, right? But they have the same declination as I showed before. Okay, parallel. Cool. Those of you who are in the fixed star class, let this be a review of many of the things that I've been presenting, hopefully at a more reasonable pace, and that we've been working on in study group. All right, let me stop time again. Yeah, so I'm hoping we get to see Mercury right here in the kind of face of the sea monster. Now, I didn't finish saying something before that I meant to, which is Mercury reminds me because of twins, but also because it said that Hermes created the golden fleece just here in the sky, this ram, to save the twins, Hellas and oh, what is his name? Her twin brother, Phrixus? That's wrong, but it's something like that. I can't remember right now. They were going to be sacrificed by their father in quite kind of biblical Abraham, Isaac feeling thing. And I believe it was Hermes who put a deer on the altar instead and saved the twins. And they flew away on the back of this golden ram that he had created. He didn't create the fleece. It was the ram who was later, by Phrixus is his name, sacrificed to Zeus when the ram brought him to a new place and he was safe. Sadly, his sister didn't make it. She fell off the flying ram to the sea at a place in Greece that's still called the Hellespont after her to this day. Okay, so there's an interesting image of like sacrifice in this zone of the heavens. You know, it's interesting as well, given the, in our day and age, truth that this is in tropical Taurus. It was once in Aries, now tropical Taurus, with this idea that like Perseus turned with Algol, who in our day and age is 26 tropical Taurus, 26 and a half tropical Taurus. That's longitude, right? Projection down to the ecliptic plane. And you see Sun at the time of this moon Jupiter occultation has a longitude of 5621. All right, well, that's 30 plus 26. In other words, that's 26 and a half Taurus. Look at Algol. 5629. Okay, that's 8 arc minutes of a conjunction in projection or in celestial longitude. All right, so there's something interesting about the sun and the eye of Medusa, which Perseus, at least mythically, used to turn the sea monster to stone. Well, that idea of Taurus as a fixed sign, and people will teach stubborn for that reason. Well, maybe there's something about less than the bull over here who's now in tropical Gemini, but this like sea monster who's been a statue ever since, or even the ram, right, who was sacrificed according to this story by Phrixus to, interestingly, to Zeus And then, was the golden fleece that Jason and the Argonauts sought. Um, yeah, well, I'm like hesitating to go into much deeper myth than that, but guarded by a dragon. And in that sense, the fleece itself was quite fixed in place too. Andromeda, who was chained, stuck, but then freed. And she split on the back of this winged horse, who was also, in a sense, freed from the blood of, well, Medusaus's head when it was freed from the rest of her body. And I tell a story there where, like, this stage of the Gorgon was really just like the cocoon between the caterpillar, who was Queen Medusa, queen on earth, and Pegasus, what she would become. Pegasus and Chrysaor, the warrior, but that's a tale for another time. All right, so bringing these myths, bringing these constellations into the tales can be an amazing thing. In doing that, from many cultures' point of view, Stellarium can very much help with this. Like, for example, the Lakota star wisdom sees this place as that we think of as the fishes. They see Pegasus as the square of Turtle, like Turtle Island. They see what we see as the fishes as the antlers of the elk. And you can see that this moon occultation is right there. I believe these stars, some of them belong, by the way, this is Hamal and Sheraton of the Ram constellation. I believe this is a quiver of arrows, but I'm not sure. I know this to be the sacred hoop, and let me leave that there. We might want to look around, like, what about in the Japanese moon stations, of which I know nothing? Be interesting to learn what this is. And Stellarium will help me learn, by the way. Actually, let's see if we can do that now. So we are in kind of what they'll call Aries space. Oh, so we're past Pegasus. That looks like something like the room and the wall, maybe. Okay, so hill, lasso, perhaps bellows. That seems to me like that would be this thing. Maybe, I don't know. One says stomach. Beta Aries is Sheraton, which is what I have highlighted here. So I guess if we look back to Jupiter, the alignment's more towards like these stars in Andromeda. So the stride, the foot, I don't know, that would be a wonderful thing to learn about and add to this, right? And so I'm just in deep appreciation for Stellarium astronomy software that helps me look at these other star cultures and try to learn a thing or two, At the Chinese, and there's a whole different tradition of star and lunar mansions there, Look at these amazing star catalogs. We could go to the Mula Pin, and you can see this like eagle here, actually. A shepherd. We could go to like the nakshatras. Let's see what happens when I hit Indian Vedic. They're actually showing more the zodiac constellations. Huh. I think this was maybe changed at some point, or maybe there's just somewhere else where there's nakshatras. Al Sufi here. I don't know, and I guess I should be doing this on my own time anyway. But I find it to be an amazingly fantastic thing to do, to cruise through these different traditions. I remembered there being next to Indian Vedic also like lunar mansions. We do have some nakshatra information written up here. Some stories about the grahas, and then links to study nakshatras in other places. And I like maybe leave that to the astrologers who are proficient in the traditions. from India to speak about where in the first degree of tropical Taurus, which most of them will consider to be more like 7 degrees sidereal Aries, somewhere in that zone, like where that lives in the nakshatras, the lunar mansions from that particular tradition. All right, so I'll stick with the West and what I know at least best, though not so well. All right, so yeah, I like to bring these stars and these constellations into the scene. There's a couple of things I want to show you still about the astronomy of this occultation. Like, let me change here in Stellarium software. I'm going to go back to like 5 a.m., which kind of, it seems to be, like right in the heart of this thing. Let me rewind time a little bit. Kind of like right when they're rising here. So why don't I just do 4:55? That moon and Jupiter, I can rewind a day, so I'm able to select Jupiter and then fast forward a day. And we'll see Jupiter at that time has a declination of 1031, a longitude of 3010, and the moon a declination of 1024, and a longitude of 3011. Okay, so 1 arc minute away from their conjunction. And then the longitude was a difference about 6 arc minutes. Well, moon, like the sun, appears to be a half a degree in our sky. Typically, importantly, the moon gets bigger when she's closer to Earth every month and smaller when furthest away, when conjunct the true black moon Lilith in our sky every month. But typically the moon's shape we can describe as very similar to that of the sun disk by size, which is a half of a degree of ecliptic longitude in our sky. All right, so that means that if the moon is within half of that, or a quarter degree, or 15 arc minutes of a planet in both longitude and declination, then occultation. Does that make sense? Now remember, before I spent so much time talking about parallax, I actually have the parallax of the moon elected here in Stellarium. That's called topocentric coordinates, a measurement from surface, topo. Okay, if I unclick that, this is the geocentric. And this shows me actually, let me just fast forward now until the moon geocentrically and Jupiter will conjoin. Let me stop time and look at Jupiter's at 30, 10, 41. All right, so when the moon gets to 30, 10, 41 or 30, 11, and it's going to be well after this. I'm just looking for this number to become 3010, or we can just visibly see when the moon passes Jupiter by. We're not going to see it here, I don't think. But anyway, this isn't what it's going to look like here. This is measured from the center of Earth. And in that respect, I can just see that from center of Earth or geocentric coordinates, this is actually not an occultation. Like at their time of the conjunction, just go back some minutes because I want the moon to be at 3011. It's like here, okay? 10:55, and Jupiter's at 3011. Great, so here, all right? That the moon's declination is plus 1112, okay? So 11 degrees north of the equator, and then Jupiter's declination is plus 1030, right? So that's 45 arc minutes. So it's less than a degree away, but the moon's only half a degree or a quarter of a degree from her center to her edge, and so no occultation for you, as shown by Stellarium software here. I could do that instead of working with declination, their angular distance from the celestial equator. I could do that with latitude, their angular distance from the ecliptic. And there I see that Jupiter's latitude is 1 south, negative 104, and moon's geocentric moon is 1/3 of a degree south. Okay, so again, 2/3 of a degree separate, which is more than 1/4 of a degree. That's kind of the distance from moon's center to her edge. So no occultation, and yet it actually is one from this point of view, because again, the distance from the moon as measured from the surface of the Earth is different than the distance to the moon as measured from the center of the Earth. Moon is the only celestial body close enough to actually have a significant difference between Earth center, geocentric, and Earth surface, topocentric, for there to be parallax shifting where moon is seen against the backdrop of stars. So here in Stellarium, I can click this topocentric coordinates button, and now we see moon on the same track as Jupiter. Okay, so that's the parallel, suggesting that this could have been an occultation, but it actually happened earlier. So I'm rewinding time here, and here's the clock, and let me just go faster. We've already seen that time. Oh, too fast. This is kind of a trippy view. Whoa, there's that occultation. It's fun. Too many grids, y'all. Too many grids in my stellarium. Too many grids. Too many grids. This is fun. So this is rewinding time. I'm pretty zoomed in now, and I'll have a camera that can actually do this. They're beneath the ground. Now well, let me rewind time a little more. Here. So, I mean, look, a little bit further east of here is going to offer maybe a better view. But the gig is, further east of here, the sun is also going to rise before it does here, taking them from your eyes. So maybe we'll head out to I don't know, Lake Tahoe or Boise and see how that looks too. So let me just move forward through time. So I'll have a camera where I can actually see moons of Jupiter like this, like Galileo did with his scope, And here's this moon, Jupiter occultation happening beneath the ground, beginning beneath the ground. So it would be nice to be over kind of even Sacramento zone. And I'll check for that because maybe road trip. Occultation. And here they are coming out and bring the atmosphere back in to also honor the refraction. Thank you, Stellarium. And that's kind of the show I'm hoping to see, and also catch Mercury following in their footsteps. That's that parallel. Okay, so next we go to Google Earth. Actually, I want to go to Astro Gold software and just show you a thing about parallax there. That's the typical astrology software that I use. Get some of these stars off the screen. Let's just put that's fine. Okay, so typically I will work with geocentric calculations, and all I can do in Astro Gold software, astrology software, is either show the geo or topo difference for the moon. Really, the nodes should be different as well, which this software is not doing. I haven't seen an astrology software that does actually. But regardless, so this is the geocentric moon. Let me just go to moon conjunct Jupiter there, right? So 0 degrees, 11 minutes Taurus. Now, I very much believe in geocentric calculation, right? So the idea, again, is that we're measuring our experience of Earth's experience of the heavens. But now if I go to a list here that will show me the declinations for moon and Jupiter at this time, Jupiter's declination 1112, we saw that in Stellarium, so 11 degrees north of the equator, celestial equator, Earth's equator projected into space, where Jupiter's declination at the time 1032. Okay, so while I have an exact conjunction, a conjunction in celestial longitude, right, 011 Taurus, 01106 Taurus, Jupiter's in the same place, right? The computer sorted that out to the moment, 5:47:19 a.m. Pacific time. Their declinations with moon at 1112 and Jupiter at 1032, though certainly I'm going to consider that a parallel, which is what you see here, moon, parallel Mercury, parallel Jupiter, parallel the node, contraparallel Saturn. It's a pretty cool lineup there. But while I'm certainly going to look at this as an energetic parallel, it's not an occultation And remember, this is geocentric, center measured from the center of Earth. Why? Because the moon, from her center to her edge, is like 15 arc minutes, a quarter of a degree, right? So if I'm here between 32 arc minutes and 12, that's 40 arc minutes. That is 2/3 of a degree. It's too far. The moon is going to be next to Jupiter, okay? But I'm not looking from the center of Earth. I'm looking from the surface of Earth. I'm going to turn this parallax moon on. And by the way, when I do chart sessions and whatnot, I might look at parallax. Like sometimes somebody's born right before the new moon geocentrically, but they're actually born on a place on Earth where they're after the new moon. And that's an intriguing thing to contemplate, right? Like I have much more questions than answers when things like that come up in sessions, as they often do, because I look at a lot of these astronomical factors that are typically kind of ignored and just not understood. But I'm a freak for them, right? Okay, so here we have, when I turn the parallax on, probably we're going to find that the moon Jupiter parallel got much stronger. See that 6 arc minutes? Only 2 arc minutes with Mercury. It's amazing. But look at where they are in longitudes. Half a degree away, right? And so this is no longer an occultation, because again, from moon's center to her edge, like a quarter of a degree, and so half of a degree is not going to work, right? I got to rewind time here to find out when, from the Earth's surface, this particular place of Earth's surface, this occultation is actually happening. So there, now moon's at 0, 10. The parallax moon, the topocentric moon, Jupiter at 0, 10. Watch me change from parallax to geocentric. See how Jupiter and nobody else changed, but the moon did? Okay. So this will be the center, this 453.19-ish will be the center of their occultation. Let's go look at that at stellarium. I got to go back to topocentric coordinates, which I am, and then I want 453. Okay. And indeed, right, no Jupiter for you. I'm going to go back a sidereal day before. There's Jupiter. No Jupiter, right? So then the question is, when does moon, let's just move forward in time. According to stellarium, and we're well zoomed in, actually see one of Jupiter's moons just kind of peeking out the side there. Oh no, it was Jupiter's label. Let me take those away. And then I want to move through time. Stay focused in. Yeah, I mean, with like a telescope, or like I have a pretty good zoom camera, probably will actually see through that thing Jupiter's moons coming out from the occultation before Jupiter himself. It's suspenseful, isn't it? Right. That's a cool thing about occultation, or like some of these astronomical things. If we go and ceremonialize them and experience them, you know, it's hard. Like if I'm in a camera lens, it's kind of hard for me to also be there. That's like a trick that I've been playing with since I've been photographing and shooting video of the sky and whatnot. So I can share that with folks who aren't there. But, you know, sometimes I'm not sharing it with myself because I'm watching the concert through the phone, as you see idiots do, instead of being at the concert. The funniest thing is, like, when I'm at a concert, right when I get so frustrated with everybody filming the thing and think about how ridiculous it is, that's usually when my phone comes out, because I want to record a little bit of my friend on stage like it was last week or whatever. Okay, here we go. Something's popping back out at 5:05, almost 5:06. Who is that? I think it's Jupiter itself. No, Callisto will be first, right? So now we can just play with that mythically. The Galileo named these so-called 4 Galilean moons after the children of Cosimo de' Medici, right? But we've since called them the Galilean moons, and they have proper names. So Callisto emerges first, and then Ganymede. And then who will it be? Callisto, you may know, is the big bear of the heavens with her son Arctus, the bear guard, Arcturus. Ganymede, some say, is actually the water bearer constellation. Zeus's water bearer in Olympus, kind of a strange little story there, as many of the Zeus stories are. I don't want to get canceled, so I'm not going to tell it on TV right now. Go read your myths and bring a heart full of love when you do. Okay, third, out from behind the moon, Jupiter himself. And Jupiter's shape looks a little weird because here's Io, another one of these so-called Galilean moons. Yeah, so tripping on Callisto, then Ganymede, and then Jupiter is maybe a fun thing to do. Let me supersize Jupiter. I think that the size of these moons might be a little bit appropriate compared to the size of Jupiter. Maybe not. And naked eye, of course, they're not visible, but Jupiter certainly is. And this just has to do with time of day. So I'm going to rewind here to when Jupiter just first emerges, like that. Stop time. So it's like 5:15 a.m. Okay. Well, let me go over here in Stellarium, or sorry, Astro Gold astrology software. Let me cast 5:15. And then you'll see, look, Jupiter 13 arc minutes from the moon. Remember, I keep saying this thing, like from the center of the moon to the edge of her disk, 15 arc minutes, a quarter of a degree, because she's half a degree in size. She's half a degree in size at average distance from the Earth, which really this is about average, I think. And I'm just looking at her aspect to Lilith here. I'm seeing her speed at 14 degrees per day, which is actually faster for the moon than typical. But I'm also remembering, I believe, Astro Gold's calculations when parallax is turned on are not necessarily accurate. So I'm seeing 1330. That means the moon is just a little bit closer to Earth than typical. So that quarter of a degree probably is a really good measurement there. So how could Jupiter come back out when he's only 13 minutes away if 15 minutes is that distance from moon center to her edge from my point of view? Well, the answer is their latitude or their declination will be slightly different. Moon's latitude at the time, minus 111, and Jupiter's minus 104. So we have a difference of 7 minutes in latitude and 13 minutes in longitude, and we got to get Pythagorean triangle with that. So let's do it. What is the Pythagorean theorem? A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I'm looking for the square root of 7 squared plus 13 squared. Hey Siri, what's 7 squared plus 13 squared? It's 49 plus 169, 218. Hey Siri, what's the square root of 218? 14.76. We're right at that quarter of a degree thing, right? Not quite there, but Jupiter has some size too. Anyway, so that's fun if you're a nerd like me. According to my calculations, the Pythagorean theorem, anyway, sorry, y'all. Some of you are like, let's talk about the astrology of this. You know what I think I'll do is stop the astronomy video and then get into an astrology video later. I don't know that I want to tell all those myths again, though. Maybe we should just keep it going. And for those of you who have that attention span and are interested not only in the immeasurable but also the measurable, you'll be with me. Here's 5:15, maybe it's 5:16, 5:17, 5:18 where we actually get Jupiter. Let's do that here. Okay, now that is that 15 arc minutes anyway. Could have left the theorems out of it. All right, so the next thing I want to do is see if I go over to Sacramento. So I'm here in the Bay Area of California, 122 degrees and 16 minutes west of the so-called prime meridian. Sacramento's like a little northeast of me, and they'll experience the sunrise before I do. They'll also experience the moon Jupiter rise before I do. They might get to see more of this occultation. Let's teach Stellarium that Sacramento's in California. Yeah, so let me just rewind time here. They kind of the same thing for them. Jupiter will be occulted during moon Jupiter rise. Jupiter's coming out a little bit earlier. The sun will rise earlier, so it looks like no Mercury potential. And I'd rather not drive, so I'm gonna go down the road. All right, so back to my home location, or actually let me go to Berkeley. Cool. And again, just to review, I want to see where on the horizon moon and Jupiter rise. Well, actually, let me just circle it here, okay? And we'll watch how Mercury rises in that same place later because he's on the same parallel. Do you see him come up? Mercury. And I kind of want to look at like this zone of azimuth. You can see that it's just south or towards east, from east northeast. All right, it's kind of like east northeast, or I don't know. But the azimuths, like I can put this grid here in Stellarium, which will show me 75, 6, 7, 8, 9, 80. So somewhere between kind of like 75 and 80 azimuth. That's kind of like the zone I want to be able to see on the horizon. I want the flattest horizon I can get, right? Because we really don't get much altitude here before the sunrise is going to take all of these folks from our eyes. Mercury will disappear first if he's visible at all. All right, so I'm looking for this kind of 75 to 80 zone on the horizon, and that's where I'm going to go to Google Earth, an amazing free resource. This is a latitude and longitude of a place that my buddy Desert sent in response to that Earth Astrology community group post that I sent out. I was like, hey, Bay Area folks, who wants to see this thing? And Desert's like, yo, this is the place to hike. 20-minute hike if you want to see this, and unless it's coming up behind Mount Diablo, which it won't, because Mount Diablo is over here. Okay. And this line you can see here, let me just show you in Google Earth. So Desert sent this latitude and longitude. I just typed it into Google Earth and it went right there. And then I'm using this ruler tool where you can, like I can drop the ruler here, oops, at this location, and then extend it out. And you can see that in the ruler tool, it's measuring in miles. Like this San Pablo Dam reservoir is like a mile away. You see that? But you can also see heading down below. Well, heading, compass heading is azimuth. So when I put this at 77 to 80, right, from up there at that location, that means that we're rising over that place, over the reservoir, right? And from Desert's experience, he goes up here because this is at the top of the ridge where you can see both east and west. He's saying this is like the best place to see a full moon rising. You know, full moon rises at sunset or setting, full moon sets at sunrise, right? So you can look both east and west. Here we only need to see east, and I'm a little concerned with asking a group of folks to have a 20-minute hike at 4 in the morning. I'd rather stay maybe closer to the road, actually. I actually do a lot of works, don't tell, okay, on the side of the road here just above San Pablo Dam Reservoir. There's a little kind of fence you're gonna jump in. You can get kind of in this zone here and you get a really beautiful view over the reservoir. The issue there is, and you can see a lot of these videos on my page or whatnot. Check out my video from Comet Neowise when he was around. I really had this beautiful experience of that comet and Venus, the third eye of the bull. It was amazing. This ring is from that moment. But the thing is, down here, like this is well up a hill. So when you get down here on the road, the hills across the way, Let me actually see if I can put a little Google man. Where you at, little Google man? I think you're hiding behind my face. Okay. Let's put a Google man down here on the road. So on the road itself, we're going to see some trees and stuff in the way, likely depending on where on the road I am. Oh, that's an interesting little gate right there. So the issue here, though, is these mountains, hills, right? I mean, we're at this point, like, not to mention those 5Gs. Anyway, we're at this point where we're really looking sensitively for something very close to the horizon. Like we want to try to climb. Actually, interesting, at a higher altitude, you experience things rising earlier. I mean, one of the reasons for sure is because you're up above the hills across the way. So it definitely makes sense to get up the hill a bit. All right. So the other thing is I can go and test it, right? Well, how would I do that? Because obviously I can't test this astronomical moment in anything but the moment. Well, let me rewind time so we can just get a better view. I can just look at other stars that rise in the same azimuth. So Stellarium Astronomy software will just kind of let me rewind the clock a bit. But it also has this amazing archaeoastronomical tool that shows me, in this case, the path of the moon. I'd rather catch Jupiter's path in this case. And then I can just see other stars that rise on that same track. Now, Aquila, the eagle, features a very bright star called Altair here. And while it's not exactly on the same track as Jupiter or Moon or Mercury, it is pretty close. So that when I rewind time here, we're going to find that Altair rises. Now this is 10:30 p.m. All right, here at like 77, and then climbs up. It's just taking that same path. And dig this. Now it's what is it called? Equizeus? I don't know, like the horse's head, and then the head of Pegasus, and then the head of the fish, all in that same zone before the occultation rises. Now, I'm not intending to be up there at 10:30, although maybe I would go up there and camp if there's a place I could go. But yeah, I could go up there at like 10:30 tonight or over the course of the next nights and just see, make sure wherever I'm standing that I can see Altair rise. And then, using a phone app or something, see kind of how high above the horizon, the altitude of Altair, by the time I can really know, oh, that's Altair, right? A lot easier to recognize the moon. But I know my stars pretty well, right? So I'll be able to see Altair rising in the summer triangle with Vega, Hermes harp. Now, interestingly, a friend of mine is a wonderful harp player, one of the great harp players, actually. And she's also a horse person and has been inviting me for some time to some stables up there. All right. And pastures, which have a really good view, less of a hike, maybe more of a drive. But it's kind of hard to deny when one of the ways that I know Altair is by working with Hermes harp. And then that at this same azimuth where the Taurus, which itself is very earthly and sometimes horsey, and we're talking 12th house, right? Looking at things rising on the eastern horizon, and you may know that the 12th house is actually associated with large animals, and usually the horse is the kind of difference between small animals, 6th house, and like horse or larger, people will say 12th house. And then you get the head of the horse, and then the head of, some call it the first horse, because it rises before the face of Pegasus, the flying horse, rising in the same exact place that later, hours and hours later, about a quarter of a spin later, Moon will be seen occulting Jupiter, right? So it kind of feels like going to the pastures, and I can go up there tonight and be there around 10 and stay out there till like 10:30, 11 and see Altair rise. And if I can see Altair rise, then I know it's a good place to be. I mean, sadly, like all of the rain here in the bay has made this place a little harder to access, but I think it will be worth it. All right, well, let's just take a kind of short look at this moment astrologically. And maybe I'll spend some more time with this later on. In this case, I'm going to look at a chart for us all. In other words, turn the parallax moon off and consider center of the Earth where we are all connected. So moon conjunct Jupiter. Now here it's the 22nd degree of Taurus rising, but maybe I'll also choose a more kind of global house system, if you will. It's really not a house system at all. But the zero Aries wheel, or the so-called natural zodiac, which puts this point zero Aries as the quote unquote ascendant, makes sense globally speaking, because that point is due east of the center of Earth. So it works like a global ascendant, if you will. This is like a houseless chart, just a sign-based chart, okay, of the Moon-Jupiter conjunction. Well, let's look and see when Jupiter ingresses Taurus. And the answer is 10:20 a.m. Pacific time on May 16th, Tuesday, the day before. Okay, well, that's a trip. I want to see at that time just that Jupiter is contraparallel Saturn within 3 arc minutes. That's interesting to me. They were parallel during their conjunction in Capricorn with Pluto. And actually the year before in 2019, all of those planets were exactly parallel or at the same declination, the same track of the heavens. So I'm intrigued by that. And speaking of, let's look at Pluto here in the first degree of another fixed sign, tropical Aquarius. Fix yourself to fix the world. Let's rewind time and look at when Pluto ingressed Aquarius after spending, well, let's go back to Pluto ingress Capricorn. Pluto first came into Capricorn January 25th, 2008. How's your stock market? How's your housing market? Anyway, and then came into Aquarius for the first time here, March 23rd, 2023. Right? So Pluto has not been in Aquarius long, came in squaring the lunar nodes, which are in early degrees Taurus and Scorpio, going to regress into tropical Aries Libra very soon. Pluto has since March 23rd stationed retrograde. That happened on May 1st. Happy Beltane. And Pluto will regress back to Capricorn here on June 11th. Wow, that's a very important day for me. And I'll be sharing reasons why another time. Holy moly. Okay, so you can see it's a big deal to me. And so, especially for those of you in the fixed star class, I'll be speaking about that date tomorrow in class when we talk about Purans, okay? Anyway, and this is why, and some of you know what I'm pointing to. But also, yeah, let me leave that for another time. So Pluto's back into Capricorn at this point, and then we'll later station direct there on October 10th. Comes back to the 28th degree of Capricorn, and then back into Aquarius to stay on January 20th, 2024. Interestingly, coming across again with the sun, the Pluto Cazimi, which is basically an annual event. All right, and then Pluto is going to be in Aquarius all the way until Pisces ingress. Oh, wait. No, he comes back into Capricorn again. I was, before this time, unfamiliar with that. So that's September 1st, 2024. Then stationing direct right in that last degree of Capricorn on October 11th, 2024, and then back into Aquarius to stay on November 19th, 2024, all the way until Pisces ingress in 2043. All right. So, I mean, it's a big deal when Pluto changes signs, right? It doesn't happen that often. He's been in Capricorns on and off since 2008. Right, and now just kind of dancing at this cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius. And so it's an interesting thing that when planets change into fixed signs, like look at when Mars ingresses tropical Leo, which will be May 20th. And we'll have Mars opposite Pluto. And in a T square with Pluto and Jupiter, because between now and then, of course, Jupiter will ingress, and this is May 16th. Whoa, Jupiter ingress tropical Taurus. And basically, as soon as he does, he's squaring Pluto. I mean, you can say he's squaring Pluto already now across the cusp. Absolutely. I mean, you can see this T square like geometrically of Mars, Jupiter, and Pluto at the time. It's really a grand cross when we consider the placement of the nodes. Mercury's in on that scene. It is a fixed grand cross, y'all. Except Mars is still on the cardinal side. So I would say this is going to get even stronger. Let's look at Moon conjoined Mars. This will happen after Mars ingresses Leo. All right, and now you get the Leo, Moon, Mars, Jupiter, North Node in Taurus, Pluto in Aquarius, the South Node in Scorpio, and right, like in the full Grand Cross picture. Hello. Like, you know, we're going to see some, the technical term is we're going to see some shit go down. I think Venus is still out of that balance at that point. She is. Hopefully that can help us look at this from different perspectives, because I imagine we are going to see some significant events here on Earth in our personal and our collective lives, reminding us just how kind of fixed we are sometimes need the opportunity to shift and take a different view. Gemini Sun can help with that too. But look at the Sun square Saturn at the time. But you know what? That's then. This is now. And this is when Moon occults Jupiter next week. Wednesday, May 17th, 2023, although this will really be the last hours of Mars's day for those of us who choose to begin days at sunrise, as astrological hours do. Here locally, I'm kind of just interested in seeing from that kind of magical time perspective, day of Mars, hour of Venus. Well, that's nice. And it's cool to see that there's this parallel between Moon, Mercury, Jupiter node, North Node, contra-parallel with Saturn, South Node. So for those of you who are learning to speak declinations, that should speak. There's kind of a balancing of Jupiter and Saturn. There's an interesting truth also with Saturn residing currently in Pisces, traditionally a sign associated as Jupiter's house. You can see this really strong Mercury-Saturn sextile. So their sextile and contra-parallel connects them in two very interesting ways. So there's like a harmony here. And I think that it's a magic with Mercury also being reborn from the beams of the sun at this time. And kind of in that, not quite midpoint, but it's almost like the Mercury-Uranus midpoint is the midpoint of Venus and Saturn. Over here somewhere. Like, I'm intrigued by that. Oh, that's the midpoint of Venus and Saturn, which is pretty close to, it's more like Moon Uranus, Jupiter Uranus. Look at that. And Mercury's pretty close as well. So I like that image of balancing an out of bounds Cancer Venus with a Pisces Saturn. And this kind of Taurus Earth that lives between those waters. I mean, you can see like there's a full grand water trine of K2 or South Node in Scorpio and Pisces Saturn and Cancer Venus who's out of bounds. And it's really like a kite with this strong Earth energy here. So this square with Pluto, and let's face like an occultation of Jupiter. What is it to like hide Jupiter away, but then have Jupiter being reborn? Look, Jupiter is also at this time, this distance from the sun in this particular sign where Jupiter is really having heliacal rise. Like, I haven't personally gone up and done the work to see Jupiter's morning star yet, right? This will be probably my first experience as Jupiter reborn as morning star. There's a new energy there. Now, for me, this Jupiter cycle, it's the last Aries cycle because Sun and Jupiter conjoined in Aries. But that the visual rebirth, at least for me, like it's already happened for other people in the sign of Aries, will be here in Taurus. There's something about Moon occulting Jupiter and then Jupiter being reborn. Jupiter's been quote unquote occulted or hidden by the beams of the sun. This is like there's something new here, you know? And to go see Mercury and Jupiter's morning stars, It's just, I mean, for me, that's just in and of itself a very powerful thing. And here they are in the square with Pluto, which, in a sense can speak of power, but we want change in Aquarius. We want change with Pluto. We might not want the kind of change that Pluto wants for us to want, but you're going to get it anyway. And so there's something here in this square of just like being too set in stone, and this need to evolve, if you will. But we can see, I think, this connection to, let me just say, like the framework Saturn of the dream, Pisces, or the foundation Saturn of compassion, Pisces. This like love for ourselves to change as we will, and to understand Saturn, that pace wins the race. There's a joke that's told in the movie Colors. It's not a joke at all. It's being told by the old cop, Robert Duvall, to the young punk cop who wants to change everything now, Sean Penn. And I'll change one of the words of the story for the sake of TV. But it goes something like this. A young bull and his father are at the top of the hill. And the young bull looks down upon a field of grazing cows, and he says, Dad, 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 let's go down there and love one of those cows. Let's run down there. Let's run down there and love one of those cows. And Daddy Bull says, no, son, let's walk down and love them all. There's something here in that. There's this like force of change. As soon as Jupiter comes into Taurus, he's also now cohabiting with Uranus, right? There's this force of Pluto who's about change, and it can be tricky change, changing himself, squaring the path of nodes, Mars coming in on this picture. But Taurus and the kind of graceful connections with Saturn just remind us like this, the long con brings in the big haul, and pace wins the race, and let's walk down and love them all and plan the work and then work the plan. It doesn't all have to happen right now. It is happening. Fix signs, fix yourself to fix the world. Bring new lensing to the rebirth of big sensuality. Allow yourself to receive so that you're only not giving yourself away and emptying your vessel through the beautiful call to be a nurturing healer, but be wise. Know that your skin is yours and you can choose what goes in and comes out. Yeah. Be in a place of reception. Be in a place of embodiment. For heaven's sake, don't just look at the heavens on a computer screen. And when you do, at least understand that it is a map of nature and reality, for whatever that word might mean. Not just some map of the soul alone. Because the more that we can connect intimately with the measurable side of the heavenly happenings, the side that we can witness, the more that we will understand about the immeasurable side. And the more we will be able to have awareness of our witness here in life. Big things are coming. There's a story of sacrifice. But you know what? In both of these cases, these tales I told of priestess in chains and the sea monster turned to stone, or this flying ram that came to save these twins from the sacrificial altar. They were saved because they were innocent. She was released because she was reverent. So being in that space of our innocence, which is a tricky thing to do after you've lived some life, right? And that requires forgiveness, especially forgiveness of self. You want to learn compassion, study in a school called Passion. Reclaim your excitements, your desires, your pleasures, and your pains. You want to walk in a place of compassion. passion with will have passion for self as well. Fix yourself to fix the world. Find that ease. Slow down and receive. And be out there on earth. Don't let the control of the mind alone or the computer AI realm offer these tools while tempting you to leave your humanity behind. Work with the ones and the O's somewhere within the computer screens, but work with the one that is you within the one that is the only thing as well. The true binary essence, which is that you are self and you are spirit. All right, so another little button to push here, which is to honor this truth that at the time of Jupiter's occultation by the moon, we have some interesting star alignments. One of those is Mars with the Herald of the Dog, Procyon. Well, Venus is approaching at least the degree of Sirius, the brightest star of our sky, the Isis star. Sun is right here at the same degree, at least the projected degree of Algol, Medusa's eye. And there's so much for us to learn in that kind of painful starry story. And if we can get past like the initial pains we feel within, I believe we can find like the treasure that awaits for us at the end of that tricky rainbow, if you will. And I'm remembering finally that I want to have a look at what some of the ancients had to say about Mirach. I will say as we go here to bring a heart full of love, because typically the ancient statements about the so-called fixed stars tend to be pretty rough. But I'm going to go to constellationsofwords.com, just such a wonderful site. I could either do this through the lists of stars at this place created by Anne Wright, and just look for in the year 2000 the ecliptic longitudes or zodiac degrees. This is tropical zodiac, and go find here very early Taurus, and there's Mirach, okay? I can see nearby Alrisha. Remember, that's this tie of the fish here. I can see stars like Mira, who is a star of sea monster. Looks like here, maybe here. No, that's one of the Alkaf stars. I don't know where Mira is. There, right in the sea monster's throat, at least according to Stellarium's art. Have you been swallowed by the whale? And was it good for you? All right, but let's look at Mirach here. So we see the constellation of Andromeda. I don't know, do you want to go womb of the priestess there? Mirach, the star in the heavens, shown in Stellarium software as kind of the waist. So many different ways of pronouncing the star throughout time. A girdle or waistcloth. Mizar is a 16th century title, a title also used for, and interestingly, Beta Ursa Major. Some have termed it singulum for girdle or belt. You know, interestingly, like the belt of Venus or the girdle of Venus is something we see on our horizons. I wonder if Stellarium actually offers this. As the sun is rising in the east, if you look towards the west, you will see the belt of Venus beneath the, it's kind of like the pink peach glow on the horizon, the girdle of Venus. So I'm interested in hearing that. The right side of Andromeda, the side of the chained woman. Very early Arabic drawings as the Lucida, the brightest star in the constellation. Of the two fishes, wow. Big fishes, those then. And marked the 26th Arabic lunar mansion back in the day, the belly of the fish, or the heart of the fish. In this location, it was Al Risha, the band chord that is being on the line uniting the fishes. But this title now belongs to Alpha Piskin, which is Al Risha. So interesting that like somehow the fishes back in the day were drawn quite differently, came up here. I mean, the truth is there are no bright stars in the fishes constellation, so I could see why they wanted to use something that you can actually kind of see naked eye. The way that I learned and teach to see the fish is to find the great square of Pegasus once the field, and then you can see the very dim stars of the fishes, like this beautiful pentacle, the ringlet, nearby and on one and the other side. So I can see it making a ton of sense for the fishes to come up to Merock, which is actually a very bright star. But there's another thing about the fishes being hard to see. You know, it's difficult to see through water, right? All right, let's continue here. The corresponding sewer, Chinese moon mansion, the man striding or the striding legs. Interesting. Egyptian Coptic lunar station, Kutan, the thread. Another name is Arit, an asterism indigenous to Egypt. Interesting. In astrology, it was a fortunate star, pretending renown and good luck in matrimony. All of this, it seems, coming from the great star names, their lore and meaning, by Richard Hinckley Allen. Those of you who are in the fixed star class, please know that there's a PDF of that book, now open source, at your course page, all right, down in the resources page. There's also a link of working with constellationsofwords.com. Okay, so lunar mansions, let's look at some of this. Arabic lunar mansions, we had read that same thing before. So belly of the fish, the heart of the fish. Influences of this mansion: increases harvest and merchandise, helps travelers through danger, strengthens prisons, and causes marital happiness and loss of treasure. Look, if you're not in the prison, you might want prisons to be strong. Like, I don't think that has to be a bad thing, right? Causes marital happiness and loss of treasure. I love the image of combining those two as one thing somehow. With moon transiting here, travel and take purgatives. All right, so all y'all who are going to join me for this star witness, hopefully from a horse pasture, I guess we're all going to have to vomit. Now, Vivian Robeson, man, this guy was having a hard day or hard month or hard year or hard life when he wrote his book on the fixed stars. I find all of his transmissions, at least 98% of them, to be a little too rough. So we hear some story about Andromeda, which I told you way too briefly. I very much encourage you to look at that tale. According to Ptolemy, the influence of this constellation is similar to that of Venus, though the legend would lead one to suppose some connection with Virgo, right? That's kind of energy of priestess. It is said to bestow purity of thought, virtue, honor, and dignity upon its natives, but to cause battle with chimerically, wildly fanciful, highly improbable fears, and a tendency to become easily discouraged. Gives love between husband and wife and reconciles adulterers. If Mars afflicts the luminaries from Andromeda, and especially if in an angle, it causes death by hanging, decapitation, crucifixion, or impalement. Well, good thing Mars isn't in Leo yet. Like, what about Pluto? Well, it sounds like we can work with this. It causes battle with fears and a tendency to become easily discouraged. Stay the course. Something about the 17th trump, the star card. Manilius, we get to hear the great poem. Wow, I'm going to open this. I'm not going to read the entire constellation page or the entire Astronomia on Andromeda there on our time, but I will be doing that later, and I encourage you to. Let's read this bit though. The man whose birth coincides with the rising of Andromeda from the sea will prove merciless, a dispenser of punishment, a warder of dungeon dire. He will stand arrogantly by while the mothers of wretched prisoners lie prostrate on his threshold, and the fathers wait all night to catch the last kisses of their sons and receive into their inmost being the dying breath. From the same constellation comes the figure of the executioner, ready to take money for a speedy death and the rites of a funeral pyre. For him, execution means profit. And oft will he bear his axe. In short, he is a man who could have looked unmoved on Andromeda herself, fettered to the rock. Perseus is not that guy. Governor of the imprisoned, he occasionally becomes a fellow convict chained to criminals, has to save them for execution. Heavy, dude. Well, I wonder if some of this, when Astronomica was written in the 1st century, let's go back there. We were there before, right? So I'm just going to erase 2,000 years. You know what? These latitudes are pretty similar to the latitudes where Manilius lived. So the sky looked pretty similar. And let's just go back to when Andromeda was rising in the east at that time. It would have been an ascendant here, which is about 15 degrees tropical Aquarius. And as, so here's the ascendant. As Andromeda's rising up, we're in later degrees of Aquarius. And then Pisces will take over. But he had something to say about when she's rising out of the sea, yeah? Which would look probably more like this. Now, I mean, that being said, it depends on which stars you're using. And here in Stellarium, we could likely go back to a Ptolemy point of view. Maybe not. Do they have like the Greek Almagest? Which I think is later. No, Ptolemy. Okay. So let's look at like from this point of view, Andromeda. Yeah, see like it's like there's more stars. So this feels about right. So I'm just kind of intrigued to see like at that same time at the ascendant, where natives are typically going to be associated by path and personage with their ascendant, right? The ecliptic intersection with the eastern horizon. At that time, looks like the water bearer is rising. Pegasus. Pretty harsh. Kind of wishing I hadn't read that, you know. And I'm not going to take it for gospel at all, by the way. Let's see, just read a few more things. So according to Ptolemy, Merodach is of the nature of Venus, and to Alvidas of Mars and the moon. It gives personal beauty, a brilliant mind, a love of home, great devotion, beneficence, forgiveness. Oh, I was just talking about that. Love, overcoming by kindness, renown, and good fortune in marriage. Whoa, Vivian Robeson said that? I guess because we had an according to Ptolemy. That's like one of the like easiest fixed star delineations I have ever read that was followed by bracket Robeson. Many interests, tendency to inspiration and mediumship as a base of artistic creations, altruism, cheerfulness, happiness, love of company. These people have a stimulating effect on others. They make friends easily and are helped on in life by others. By Elspeth Ebertine. I mean, another fixed star text where you don't typically get such nice transmission, unfortunately. It's great for this. So let's, I guess, read with the moon. And suddenly trouble. What? Okay. Trouble with opposite sex owing to indiscretions. Bad for domestic affairs. Honor through marital matters. It just seems like it'd be difficult to have those both. With Jupiter, since this will be happening, help from women, but danger of scandal, much travel, legal or ecclesiastical difficulties. Yeah, so it's like the star is good, but as soon as you put a planet on it, okay. With Mercury, vacillating, unstable, peculiar events, many travels and changes. And is this with Mercury? Let's actually just, I guess, in our last thing here, put the star on the screen. AstroGold software makes this easy to do, which I'm very thankful. Okay, there you see the moon, Jupiter with the Mirok position there, okay? So, I was saying Mercury, but I was actually very wrong in that. Mercury's parallel. Oh, let me go back to our modern millennia. Mercury at the time will be parallel the moon and Jupiter, right? But that's declination. He's on the same track, certainly not the same track as Mirok way up here. Let me get to the modern look. Mercury's more aligned with the head of the sea monster, the head of the ram, up to Cassiopeia, interestingly. So Cassiopeia's star, Shadar, has a longitude of 38, so 8 degrees tropical Taurus, and that's much closer to where Mercury is at the time. I did want to just look, however, at this Moon-Jupiter connection, also to this very interesting star in the sky there, and in my heart right here these days, this Garnet who recently came home from me, the stone of Regulus. And let me show this to you in Stellarium using this wonderful Astronomy tool. I'm going to capture Jupiter here. So Regulus will be well below the horizon at the time. But you can see that the path that Regulus will later take through the sky is very similar to the one carved out by this Jupiter moon occultation in Mercury. A little bit less so than Altair was before. And Regulus at this time is very visible in the evening sky, but not in the morning at all. But later in the year, it'd be fun to just kind of tune into the same space and see that Orion rises there. Here comes the herald of the dog, Procyon. And then later we're going to see Regulus come up pretty close on the horizon to where the occultation was. And that's what we see here in this image of moon, parallel Mercury, Jupiter, parallel North Lunar Node, parallel Regulus within 38 arc minutes. So there's something about the heart of the lion that for me, now in the tropical sign of Virgo, as if it's that reverence and that practice that will help us reclaim the heart. Typically, we don't work with aspects to stars, and stars it said don't cast rays, interestingly. If we did, this is a very strong trine of the Jupiter occultation to Regulus, who since 2012 has resided in tropical Virgo. But while that trine might not be considered by most who work with the fixed stars, certainly, well, I was about to say certainly the parallel would be, and that's not true either, but I will say should be. All right, so one other thing I want to do is using this wonderful tool of Astro Gold software. I want to check into parans with the moon and Jupiter, especially at the time. I might start with the Bohemians. So moon was at the IC while Procyon set. Jupiter's not. Oh yeah, Jupiter, same trip. So I'll show you that to Installarium before I'm complete. And for those of you in the fixed star class, we're looking ahead to tomorrow's work here in study group next week. Let me look about perhaps expanding my orbs a bit. Moon, and we'll see this with Jupiter. Al-Qaid was culminating when they were at the IC. This is kind of brilliant. And when I say they, it actually won't apply to moon. But so we have Jupiter at the IC with Procyon setting and Al-Qaid culminating. Okay, so beyond that, I might expand my star list here a bit. And what I'm going to do here is look at only Jupiter. Apex, I know nothing about you. Peacock, which is a star in the Peacock. Go meet you. Well, it's a lot of stars to learn about. Messar theme is a star of the Ram, so they'll culminate together. Wasat, it's been coming up a lot. It's a star of the twins. And I'm kind of most interested in when Jupiter's rising, since we'll be watching that. And the rising can speak of new. Al-Nitam, Wasat, and Kebash. So I want to be here. Al-Nitham, who are you? Okay, so basically what I'm looking at there is while Jupiter's rising. What? Oh, I see. On the 17th. What stars is he rising with? I would say Bharani at the, well, ass of the ram. This star in Perseus's foot or knee. Star of the statue. Star in the wolf lupus. Not too far from the setting of Hezi. Foot of the big bear. So some of these stars I'm not seeing and I would like to, like, who are you? El Kopra. Koph. That's not in Stellarium. Ursa Major. So Chi Ursa Major. So that's this kind of foot of the bear. Talitha. Yeah, cool. Well, I'll see more when I go have a look around. I'm gonna just rewind time because I said let me show you that Paran here. I'm gonna rewind time to when Jupiter was at the IC there. Stellarium is so amazing. So this is Jupiter anti-culminating, and one thing we read was that at the time Procyon was setting, and well, frankly, I can't remember what the other one was. But I also want to look to when Jupiter culminates later in the day. Somehow that gave me the 18th. There. That he's culminating at the same time as Sheraton, so the Ram. And so while during the occultation here at 5 in the morning, it's like a little harder to see this connection of Jupiter moon to the eye of the Ram, right? Because they're just in earlier zodiac degrees. Well, when we bring Jupiter up to the midheaven to culminate, it's less, in this case, about ecliptic longitude and much more about right ascension. That Jupiter and Sheraton at the time will be on the same degree of the celestial equator. Looks like triangulum as well, and now more like the feet of Andromeda. So for those of you who are kind of out with me tripping on this thing, hopefully with our eyeballs next week, let's spend some time talking about that. And for those of you in the fixed stars class, maybe we'll look at that a little bit deeper in our study group next week. It's like a kind of fun example to look to. We'll be meeting in study group shortly after some of us go out and witness this in the sky with our eyes. If you live elsewhere in California, I hope you'll go out and check them out. And maybe some of the tools that I showed you using some of these free softwares like Stellarium and Google Earth will help you choose a place to be. And maybe constellation alignments like horses' heads will also help. All right, friends, thanks for spending so much time with me here today. If you're still here, I'm going to assume that you enjoyed your time. So please give the video a like. That seems like it'd be a nice thing to do. And share this around with folks that you find might also enjoy it.